The one detail that changes everything about Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu. There's a moment in a behind-the-scenes clip that fans have been sharing obsessively for the past few weeks. It lasts exactly 4 seconds. Barış Arduç glances across the room, and for just a heartbeat, his expression changes. It's subtle. Most people would scroll right past it. But the fans who caught it didn't just notice it. They started digging. And what they found goes so much deeper than anyone expected. This isn't a tabloid story. This isn't gossip. What Turkish entertainment fans have uncovered in recent months is something far more interesting than rumors. It's a pattern. A trail of small, almost invisible moments that, when you line them all up together, tell a completely different story than the one the public has been told. Hidden details baked into interviews, set photos, social media behavior, and public appearances. Details that raise one very uncomfortable question. How much of what we thought we knew about Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu was actually true? By the end of this, you'll never look at their story the same way again. And there's one detail near the end of this that almost nobody is talking about yet. When you hear it, you'll understand why fans are calling it the missing piece. To understand what's been discovered, you first have to understand who these two people are and why Turkey, and the global Turkish drama audience, cared so deeply about them in the first place. Barış Arduç is not just a popular actor. He is arguably one of the most recognized faces in Turkish television over the past decade. Born in 1987, he built his career steadily, taking roles that required real emotional range. He wasn't handed stardom. He worked through smaller productions, refined his craft, and eventually landed the kinds of projects that turned him into a household name across Turkey, the Middle East, and large parts of Europe and South America, where Turkish dramas have developed enormous fan bases. His looks are striking, but what made him genuinely beloved was something more specific. There's a realness to how he performs. Viewers consistently describe it the same way. He doesn't look like he's acting. Elçin Sangu is a different kind of star. She came up through modeling before transitioning into acting, and that path gave her something unusual. A physical confidence on screen that's almost impossible to teach. She's stunning in a way that the camera loves, but she also made deliberate choices in her career to take roles with depth and complexity. She wasn't interested in being just the beautiful love interest. She wanted substance. And the projects she chose reflected that. When these two were cast together, the audience reaction was immediate. Chemistry on screen is one of those things that's either there or it isn't. You can't manufacture it. And between Barış and Elçin, it was undeniably there. Fans around the world noticed. Fan pages exploded. Their scenes together were dissected and replayed. People weren't just watching the show. They were watching them. And then their real-life relationship became public knowledge and everything intensified. For a period of time, Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu were together romantically. This wasn't a secret they kept perfectly hidden. Turkish media covered it. Fan accounts cataloged every shared appearance, every moment they were photographed in the same place. There's a particular warmth to how they were together publicly that made people root for them. Not just as actors. As people. Then they broke up. The announcement was quiet, the way most real heartbreak tends to be. No dramatic statement. No lengthy social media post explaining what happened. Just a gradual absence. Fewer shared moments. Then no shared moments at all. Then the confirmation that they had separated. The Turkish entertainment media moved on relatively quickly, as media always does. Barış continued working. Elçin continued working. Life kept moving. And for casual followers of their careers, that was probably the end of the story. But for dedicated fans, something never quite sat right. Here's where the discoveries start. A community of Turkish drama fans, spread across multiple platforms including dedicated forums, YouTube channels, and social media groups, began doing something in the past year or so that serious entertainment analysts would actually respect. They started going back through archives. Old interviews. Promotional content from years ago. Behind-the-scenes footage. And they began doing comparative analysis. What does that mean in practice? It means they watched the same interview multiple times and noticed that the body language told a completely different story than the words being spoken. It means they spotted continuity details in photographs that placed two people in the same location on a date when both had publicly stated they were in different cities. It means they caught the tiny, involuntary micro-expressions that cameras capture, but that most viewers never register because they're not looking for them. And some of what they found is genuinely fascinating. One of the most shared discoveries involves a promotional interview the two did together during the peak of their shared project. On the surface, it looks like every other promotional interview. Two attractive actors sitting across from each other, talking about the show, being charming and professional. But fans began slowing down specific segments of the footage and pointing out something that takes a second to understand once you see it. The timing of their reactions to each other doesn't match what you'd expect from two people in a purely professional relationship. There's a particular moment where one of them says something that lands as a joke, and the other one's reaction comes about half a second too fast. Not because they heard the joke, because they had heard it before. Multiple times. In private. That might sound small. But to people who study interpersonal communication, that specific kind of pre-reaction is one of the clearest behavioral signals of genuine intimacy. You only finish someone's sentences and pre-laugh at their jokes if you've spent a lot of real time with them. And this interview was filmed during a period when both had been publicly vague about the nature of their relationship. That detail alone sparked hundreds of threads. But it was just the beginning. Another discovery that fans have been circulating involves social media behavior from both accounts going back several years. This one required the kind of meticulous archiving that most casual fans would never have the patience for. Someone had been systematically saving posts and engagement patterns over a long period of time, and what the data showed was a rhythm. A consistent pattern of likes, comments, and shares that aligned in very specific ways during certain time periods, and then dropped off sharply during others. The pattern wasn't proof of anything on its own, but mapped against the known timeline of their relationship and its apparent end. The social media rhythm told a story that matched up with remarkable accuracy. The interesting part wasn't the peak of engagement. It was what happened in the months around their breakup. Or more precisely, what didn't happen. Fans who were expecting the usual digital distance that follows the end of a relationship didn't find it. What they found instead was something more ambiguous. Certain posts were still being engaged with in subtle ways. Not obvious enough to be a statement. Just enough to be noticeable if you were specifically looking. This is where interpretation becomes important, because here is where confirmed observation ends and fan speculation begins. And to be fair to both Barış and Elçin, what fans interpret from social media behavior is exactly that. Interpretation. No one outside their personal lives can know what any individual like or comment or pattern actually means. Social media behavior is complicated. People engage with former partners' content for 1,000 different reasons that have nothing to do with lingering romance. Habit. Mutual professional networks. Genuine friendship. Algorithm-driven feeds that resurface old content. Any of these explanations could be true. But the fans who found these patterns weren't claiming certainty. They were claiming something more interesting. They were claiming inconsistency. Specifically, the public narrative of a clean, complete ending didn't match the digital footprint that the timeline showed. Something about the story as it had been presented publicly felt incomplete. And then came the detail that genuinely stopped people in their tracks. There's a photograph. It's not a paparazzi image. It's not from a red carpet or an official event. It's one of those ambient, semi-public images that gets taken at a social gathering and makes its way online because someone in the background of the frame is recognizable. In this image, the recognizable detail is not who is in the foreground. It's a reflection in a mirror visible in the background of the shot. And in that reflection, partially obscured but distinctly there, two people can be seen in what appears to be a genuine, unguarded moment of closeness. The image quality isn't perfect. Reflections never are. And both individuals whose images appear in that reflection have never confirmed or commented on this specific photograph. So let's be absolutely clear. This is unconfirmed. It is a piece of fan-circulated content whose authenticity has not been independently verified. It should be treated as exactly what it is. An interesting, unconfirmed image that raises questions rather than answers them. But the reason it matters in the context of this larger story is what it represents. It represents a pattern that multiple independent observers arrived at through different routes. The sense that whatever the official story of this relationship's ending was, the reality behind it was more complicated and more human than any public statement captured. Now here's the part of the story that doesn't get discussed enough. Why does any of this matter to the people who care about it? That's an easy question to dismiss with cynicism. Celebrity gossip, parasocial obsession, people with too much time on their hands. Those are the easy answers. But they're not the honest ones. The honest answer is that Turkish dramas, at their best, are not just entertainment. They're an emotional experience that creates genuine connection between audiences and the stories being told. And when the people telling those stories, the actors embodying those fictional relationships, appear to have a real connection of their own, it creates a layered experience that's genuinely unusual in global entertainment. The lines between the fictional love story and the real one blur in ways that are emotionally resonant for audiences. When that real story ends, or appears to end, it creates a kind of grief that might look strange from the outside, but makes complete psychological sense. Fans weren't just invested in the show. They were invested in the idea that the connection they saw on screen was real. And when that connection seems to disappear or become complicated, it raises questions not just about two celebrities, but about the nature of what the audience witnessed. Was it real? Did it matter? What happened to it? These are actually very human questions dressed up in celebrity context. And the fans doing this detective work aren't being delusional. Most of them know exactly what they're doing. They're engaging in collaborative storytelling, filling in the gaps of a narrative they care about with the available evidence. The most thoughtful ones are careful to separate what they can confirm from what they're speculating. And some of the observations they've made are genuinely impressive in their detail and rigor. There's another layer to this story that adds a completely different dimension. Both Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu have spoken, at different points and in different contexts, about the experience of playing romantic roles opposite someone you have genuine feelings for. The specific quotes vary depending on which interview and which translation you're working from, but the consistent thread is this. Both have acknowledged that it's complicated. That the lines between performing emotion and feeling it can become genuinely difficult to maintain. That working intimately with someone in that kind of creative space creates a kind of vulnerability that doesn't turn off when the cameras stop. These aren't controversial statements. Most serious actors say similar things. But in the context of what fans have been discovering, these quotes take on new significance. Because they suggest that even the people at the center of the story recognized, at least in general terms, that what was happening between them in front of the camera was not entirely separate from what was happening between them as people. That's a remarkably honest thing to acknowledge publicly. And it's one of the reasons that even viewers who are skeptical of celebrity relationship analysis find themselves drawn into this particular story. Because both individuals have, in different moments, offered glimpses of genuine reflection about their experience. They haven't been entirely opaque. Now let's talk about where things stand today, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting in a current sense. Both Barış and Elçin have continued building impressive careers. Barış has taken on projects that have extended his reach into international markets, particularly as the global appetite for Turkish content has grown exponentially on streaming platforms. Elçin has similarly expanded her professional footprint, taking on projects that have reinforced her reputation as one of the most capable actresses of her generation in Turkish television. What fans have noticed, and this is one of the more recent discoveries that's been generating discussion, is a specific alignment that has occurred in their respective project choices and public trajectories over the past couple of years. This is subtle, and again, interpretation must be careful here. But observers have pointed out that the timing of certain professional announcements, the nature of the projects chosen, and even certain thematic elements in the roles each has selected appear to run in a kind of parallel. Whether this is coincidence, the natural result of two people who developed similar artistic sensibilities during years of working in the same industry, or something more intentional, is impossible to say from the outside. But it's one of those details that, once you notice it, is hard to unsee. And there's one final discovery that fans have been discussing, the one mentioned earlier that most people are still catching up to. In a recent interview, Barış Arduç was asked a fairly standard question about what he looks for in a creative partner, professionally speaking. The question was generic. The kind of thing interview subjects answer dozens of times without thinking about it. But his answer was specific in a way that caught people off guard. He described a set of qualities. Not in abstract terms. In very concrete, precise terms. The ability to be completely present. The willingness to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. The kind of instinct that comes from genuine feeling rather than technical performance. The sense that when something real is happening in a scene, neither person runs away from it. He wasn't asked about Elçin Sangu specifically. Her name didn't come up in that portion of the conversation. But fans who have spent years watching both of them work immediately recognized that the qualities he was describing mapped almost perfectly onto the specific things that critics and viewers have consistently said about Elçin's performance style throughout her career. Was it about her? There is absolutely no way to confirm that. He was answering a general question and might have been drawing on any number of influences and collaborators from across his career. That is the honest, fair answer. But the reason this moment matters, the reason it became the detail that fans say ties everything together, is the timing. And the specificity. And the fact that it came in the middle of a run of interviews where, for the first time in a while, Barış had been slightly more open in general about reflecting on his career, his relationships with collaborators, and the experiences that shaped him as an artist. Taken alone, it's a pleasant interview moment. Put it next to everything else that's been uncovered and discussed, the behavioral patterns, the social media analysis, the archival footage, the photograph, the parallel career trajectories. And it becomes the final piece of a picture that fans have been building for months. The picture doesn't tell you exactly what happened between Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu. It doesn't tell you whether their relationship truly ended or whether something more complicated persists. It doesn't tell you whether what we see in their professional lives is a reflection of something personal or simply two talented people continuing to do their work. What it tells you is something more fundamental. That the connection those audiences felt watching them together, the thing that seemed almost too real to be purely fictional, wasn't a coincidence or a trick of good casting. Something genuine was there. Something that left marks on both of them as artists and as people. Something that fans, with remarkable patience and attention, have found the evidence of in the spaces between the official story. And maybe that's the most interesting takeaway of all. Not whether they're together or apart or somewhere in between. But the fact that the most honest version of their story isn't found in any press release or carefully worded statement. It's hidden in the 4-second glances, the pre-laughs and promotional interviews, the precise language of answers to questions that weren't really asking what the answers were actually about. The truth in celebrity narratives almost never lives in the headlines. It lives in the details. And in this case, the fans who refused to stop looking found something worth finding. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.